Welcome to PLDC Video Assignment 2010. Our subject we are going to discuss about is programming practices in open source and commercial programming language. First of all, I am going to introduce my team members. The Niyaz M.R, the group leader, the Dharmasiri K.B.V.D.L and the Ambeygoda T.T and Herath H.M.L.M.B and Imal K.W.S. The Niyaz M.R myself is going to do the presentation, and Dharmasiri and Herath will assist me on this presentation. This is a statistical information from internet about the popularity of the programming language among the programmers, which we can see that Java holds the highest share and it's open source language, and C# takes the 8th place, which is commercial language owned by Microsoft. What we are going to discuss about today, everyone is a programmer who can write code, and with a few months of programming experience, everyone can write working program, but make it work it easy. But doing it more efficient way need more practice and follow standard that just make it work. How we can write efficient code? That's a question. So simple answer is through program practices and follow programming standard. But we are going to discuss some of the language of program practices from open source language and commercial language. The language which we'll discuss is C# and Java, and their programming practices. C# is a Microsoft-owned programming language. The Visual Studio can be used as IDE. The Java is owned by the Sun Microsystem, and it being as owned by IDE, but Java is open source. First, we are going to talk about the program practices in the commercial language C#. These are the 7 points which will be drilled down in the coming slides. First, the program practices of length of method. Avoid writing very long method. A method should typically have 1 to 15 lines of code. If the method has more than 25 lines of code, you must consider to refactoring into separate method if it exceeds the best practice limit. Synthetic consistency principle program practice. The method name should tell what it does. Do not use mislead names. If the method name obvious, there is no need of documentation explaining what the method does. So here's an example. On this method, employee info is clearly defined. It's going to save the employee information. This is used to increase readability. But on method info detail, we can see define about info detail, which will not provide any sense that what the method does until we explore the code inside the method. So next we're going to talk about the method should do one function program practice. The method should do only one function. Do not combine more than one function in a single method, even if those functions are very small. Avoid passing too many parameters to the method. If you have more than 4 to 5 parameters, it is good practice to define a class or structure. If you have a method returning a collection, running an empty collection instead of none. If you have no data to return, for example, if you have a method returning an array list, always return a valid array list. If you have no item to return, then return a valid array list with a 0 item. This will make it easy for the calling programs to just check for the count rather than doing an additional check for the null. Avoid public method and property unless they really need to access from outside the class. Use internal if they access only within the same programming code. We will go through 2 examples of a best practice and not recommended practice. So when you take this coding, we can see that 2 methods are being called, like send mail and send address. And when you check how it's implemented on separate methods rather than combine both methods. This has been suggested as a best practice for the programs. When we take the same thing from the previous example, so we can see the 2 methods are being called. We can see that both 2 methods are being implemented on the same method and call one method to do the function. This have been not a good practice, have been recommended. Now we'll go to the exception handling best practice. Always watch for the unexpected value. For example, if you are using a parameter with 2 possible values, Never assume that one will not match with the only possibility with other value. Plan always for to handle the exception when something goes wrong in the program. This will increase the stability of the program. The event handler should not contain code to perform the required action. Rather call another method from the event handler. In the application startup, do some kind of self-check and ensure all required files and dependencies are available in the expected location. Check for database connection in startup if required. Give a friendly message to the user in case of program. Error message should help the user to solve problem. Never give error message like error in application. There is an error. Instead give specific message like failed to update database. Please make sure the login ID are correct, which will be understood by the end user. When displaying error message, in addition to tell what is wrong, the message also tell what should user do to solve the problem. Instead of message like fail to update database, if we suggest to give error message like fail to update database, please make sure the login ID and password are correct. This will give some sense to what user must do to this step to solve the issue. Show short and friendly message to the user, but log the actual error with all possible information for the troubleshooting or diagnosis purpose. We will go to example of except and limit practice. I will just explain the code. You can see that it's a for loop if condition have been applied to this code, and if you see the if and if else and have been other blocks which define to handle the exception when something goes wrong on this coding. This I recommend as a good practice. So we'll go to another example which have been seen like there's if and else. There are nothing to handle it. If something goes wrong, the program may be possible to crash out, or the error message may be that kill the program. So this have been not good recommended practice to implement on your programs. Now we'll go to the hard code value of program practices. Do not hard code number. Use constant instead of. Declare constant at the top of the file and use it in your code. However, using constant are also not recommended. You should use a constant in a config file or database so that you can manage it later. Declare them as a constant only if you are sure that value will never need to change. Do not hard code string. Use a resource file like URL. Never hard code a path or drive name in a code. Get application path, programmable and use relative path for this network path. Never assume your code will run only on C drive. You must never know. Some user may run in a network or Z drive. You should plan this previous on your program. Never hard code a static IP into your program. Try to use like a DNS name or a URL to this HTML URL or to configure it so you can change it future. So if you hard coded in your code, it will be very hard to change between servers to server. We just look the best practice of the compare string. Convert string to lowercase or uppercase before comparing. So here we can see example. Okay, if you just comparing strings with a database or some sort of XML file, you should be used to convert uppercase to lowercase and lowercase to uppercase to get the intended results on the search. Use string.empty class instead of inverted bracket. For example, if you can use string and call the class do the action rather than calling the inverted brackets to do the action. That's why we not recommended practice on your program. The best practice on the variable. Avoid using member variable. Declare local variable whenever necessary and pass it to other method instead of sharing a member variable between method. If you're sharing member variable between method, it will be difficult to track which method change the value and when. So we'll discuss also the other practice. Do not have more than one class in a single file. Avoid having a large file. If a single file have more than 1000 line of code, is good practice for refactoring. Split them in logically 2 or more classes. Use assembly info file to fill information like version number, description, company name, copyright, notice. If you're opening a database connection or socket or file stream, always close them in a finally block. This will ensure that even if an exception occurs after opening the connection, it will safely close the final block. Make sure you have a good logging class which can be configured to log error, warning, or trace. If you configure to a log error, it should only log error. But if you configure to log trace, it should record all, like error, warning, and trace. Your log class should be written such as way that in future you can change it easily to a window event log or SQL server or email to administrator or to a file without any change in any other part of the application. Use the log class extensively throughout the code to record error, warning, and even trace message that can help you to troubleshoot a problem. We have been going through some of the program practices of the C# language in a nutshell. So we are going to talk about the Java program practices on next video. Thanks for the viewing video. So we are looking forward to the next video.